We're going to make the case for third parties. And I feel like in order to do that, we need to go all the way back to the beginning of this Justice Democrat strategy. Now, CJ was the one who brought this to my attention because I forgot about all of this. I forgot about all of this from the beginning. It has been a while. It's been a couple of years. But there was something that CJ pointed out from this video here from Humanist Report when they first announced and introduced the Justice Democrats. Here's what we are going to do. In the case for third parties, we're going to do a deep dive into the pros and cons of that Justice Democrat strategy and the pros and cons of third parties. At the end, tonight on Call In, we're going to come up with some type of solution because I don't like to just talk about the problems. But what we are also going to do is we are going to investigate why the Justice Democrat strategy has been failing. Because remember what I always tell you, don't just talk about the problems, always ask, but why? Why did this happen? Why did we get here, right? So let's go ahead and get started with this video here from Humanist Report. It's called Progressives Launch Justice Democrats Initiative to Take Over the Democratic Party. There's a lot said here, but we're going to focus on the beginning of this video, and we're going to do some dives here and there. Listen to this. I just want to refresh your memory.
The Young Turks and Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk have teamed up with veterans of Bernie Sanders' campaign to launch a new initiative to take over the Democratic Party once and for all. So it's called Justice Democrats, and this is something that I am overwhelmingly excited about. Now, the first question, before we even get to what Justice Democrats are, is why even bother with the Democratic Party? Because I talk about how the Democratic Party is a lost cause and how they're rotten to the core, so why not just start a new party? Why not take all of the resources that Justice Democrats can raise and funnel this towards creating a brand new party that we're in control of? Well, I'll let Kyle Kulinski explain why that might not be the best strategy.
Okay, so you heard what Mike Figueredo just said, right? Why not take those resources and start a third party? Okay. That came from Humanist Report. So when we say that at RBN, this didn't come out of nowhere. I have to refresh your memory. This is an old video, but this did not come out of anywhere. So for people who say that we're being nihilist, was Mike Figueredo being a nihilist when he made that suggestion? I'm going to go on. There's more that he says about that. But I want to let you know that idea did not just come up out of the wind. Okay? Now here, Kyle is going to make the argument for why they're not looking to do that, to start a third party. Again, we're looking at the pros and the cons here tonight, to be fair. So let's do that.
And all of the institutional biases against third parties are so immensely strong that we're effectively handicapping ourselves if we go into it trying to do a third party. It's like taking a sledgehammer, swinging it at your kneecap, and then saying, okay, now it's time to go run that marathon you spoke about. Well, if I'm going to run the marathon, I should be in tip-top shape now, shouldn't I? I should give myself the best possible chance, not the worst chance. So, for example, the Green Party, who I absolutely love, they've had some successes here and there, but by and large, they are not what's viewed as a viable third party. And again, it's not their fault. It's the fault of the institutional biases against them and against third parties in general.
Okay, so let's interject here for just a second. So here is Kyle admitting to you that the system is the problem. That's why these third party candidates have difficulty succeeding on a national level. I acknowledge that. I've acknowledged that multiple times. I do understand that third party is not easy. I do understand also that it is easier for people to go the route of putting a progressive through the Democratic Party. I totally get all of that. I'm not here to tell you that third party is an easier way to win. But I think what's important to note is that he said that the system is the problem. So if you know that the system is the problem, Why are you choosing to participate in the same system that is heavily, heavily guilty of excluding third-party candidates and independent candidates? Why do you want to participate in that same corrupt system? That's just something to mention there. Like I said, we're going to do a deep dive in this tonight for the case for third parties. He also mentioned the Green Party. I think he's looking at this on a national level only. I've told you guys before, when it comes to local politics, the Green Party has actually done pretty well. And I think that's another critique we can add here to this Justice Democrat strategy. Maybe it was not a good idea to only focus on national races. Maybe it was a good idea to also focus on where can we implement Justice Democrats on the local level. How about we get some of these progressives to run for city council, to run for mayor, to run for governor? I think that would have been a stronger strategy, because then you would have progressives on the local level and in the national level. So where the national level, they don't fall through, or they don't go through with what they said they were going to do, then you can defer and look at the progressives that are holding those governor positions or those mayor positions and say, okay, they're not doing this in DC. They're not, using their leverage. We need you guys on the local level to implement some of these policies. We didn't even have a progressive governor here in Massachusetts. Our governor is Republican. Governor Baker is Republican. And we have implemented progressive policies. This is why I say the focus more so, we have a better chance of getting things done is on the local level, not so much on the national level. Let's go back in.
But if you're a member of the Green Party and you're a member of the Democratic Socialists, let me tell you right now, you are our allies. I view you as our allies. So I don't want people to take it the wrong way. I need them to understand exactly where we're coming from. And if you read the platform of the Justice Democrats, we specifically refer to reforms that we favor that would help third parties and remove some of those institutional biases.
So back then, they were telling you that the Green Party was their ally. Do they say that now? Do you see how things changed? You don't have to be a progressive running through the Democratic Party to be progressive. There are progressives in the Green Party. In fact, I would argue some of the people in the Green Party are way more progressive than the progressive candidates that we have in DC. But back then they were saying, no, you guys are our allies. What happened? Let's go on.
But based on our calculations, our highest chance of winning and actually getting the policies we want implemented is to take over the Democratic Party.
In reference to getting policies implemented, how's that working out? How's that working out? What policies have been let's go through. Actually, Mike Figueredo is going to go through those lists, but top one off the top of my head, $15 minimum wage. Was that implemented? No, it was rejected. And you know who rejected it? Democrats. We expected the Republicans to do that, but you had 8 Democrats, I think one's an independent, you had 8 Democrats reject it. Let's go on with Mike.
So in my opinion, I think Kyle's logic here is absolutely sound, and I've kind of made similar arguments here. I've stated that, yes, unfortunately, we have to begrudgingly work within the Democratic Party, but simultaneously try to build a viable third-party alternative, because unfortunately...
What was that? This is the missing piece, you guys. I have to tell you guys the name of this video too, so you can go back to this. This is a very key piece. Listen to this.
Here is absolutely sound, and I've kind of made similar arguments here. I've stated that, yes, unfortunately, we have to begrudgingly work within the Democratic Party, but simultaneously try to build a viable third-party alternative, because...
But simultaneously try to build a third-party alternative. What happened to that? What happened to that piece? See, this is the problem. And I pointed this out. I'll mention this. I'll play this clip in just a second. When we were on Bad Faith, that piece was never implemented. The focus was Justice Democrats, those progressives going through DC, and that's it. So there was no third party alternative option that became a part of the Justice Democrat strategy. Now there's MPP, but that was that's a separate thing. So that piece didn't happen. So when you have the squad members choose to vote along with corporate Democrats and choose not to use their leverage, there was no third party that you could fall back on to come in and pick up the piece. And you see the problem? This is the problem. Remember, Kyle just told you in that video, the Green Party, I consider you to be our allies. Why weren't we working together then? Let's go back in. There's one more piece I want to play, and then we're going to move on to that other clip.
Unfortunately, with our two-party system, with our single-member district plurality, winner-take-all system, it's really difficult for a third party to gain prominence in the United States currently. So I agree that it's easier to just try to...
Again, they were only looking at the national level. And I tell you time and time again, I think that was a mistake. I think it was a mistake.
To take over the Democratic Party rather than trying to create a viable alternative. Now, I think that we should still try to build up the Green Party at the same time. But
what? I think that we should try to build up the Green Party at the same time. What happened to that, you guys? See, I want to show you this because I want to let you know. You think some of you guys, well, not all of you, but some of you guys like watch us at RBN and you hear us say these things. You're like, that's crazy. What are they thinking about? This didn't come out of nowhere.
this is a great initiative, and I'm really excited about it. So the goal of Justice Democrats is to take over the Democratic Party by primarying corporatist Democrats. And so Justice Democrats, they're going to vet candidates that actually agree with the progressive platform. And they're all going to be signing a pledge, and they're vowing to not take corporate money. It's going to be funded specifically or exclusively by grassroots efforts. So their platform includes a...
Okay, so this piece here, I will say, do I agree with the strategy of them not taking corporate money? 100%. I always said, yeah, that makes sense. That's the way to go about doing it. Always agreed with that. Here's the problem. Even though you can control, with the Justice Democrat organization, they could control those candidates not taking corporate money, the ones running through JD, what they could not control are the corporate candidates and the Democratic Party and the DNC that happily takes corporate money. And what they also did not factor in, and I'm guilty of this too. I'm not trying to call people names, but I was guilty of this too. They didn't factor in the fact that maybe those corporate Democrats in the House may not be so happy and welcoming to these candidates that won off of grassroots donations and not taking corporate money. Maybe they might see that as a threat. Maybe the DNC and the Democratic Party, which are both corporately owned, may try to use their own corporate money to work against those progressive candidates, to prevent more progressive candidates from getting in. Maybe some of that corporate money from the DNC and from the Democratic Party may be used to start PACs to work against those candidates when they were even run for re-election, or any new progressive candidates that were to emerge. That was the piece when we talk about the corporate money. I think what we did not think about is the piece we could not control, which is you could not control the Democratic Party still taking corporate money, the DNC heavily taking corporate money, and them using that money and using that power to prevent other progressives from getting into the House. That's something that I think was not thought about at that time. So when people ask me, what do you think about people who want to do this strategy? My response today, and it wasn't back then, but my response today is their number one focus should be on getting corporate money out of politics. Because until you get the corporate money out, this is always going to be an issue. The progressives that got in around the first round, they got in there. You see, not too many of them getting in now. The corporate money found a way to always fight against it. So if you want to do that strategy, your number one focus should be getting corporate money out of politics, getting out of the Democratic Party, at least at a minimum. Now, there was this push to end Citizens United. I don't know what happened with that. Don't really know, but I don't hear as much about that today. But let's go on.
Constitutional amendment to get money out of politics, raising the minimum wage, ensuring healthcare and education are rights for everyone, ending unnecessary wars, ending the war on drugs, creating a renewable energy revolution, and
stop the presses. Now he's going through the policies that Justice Democrats were supposed to be in favor of. Now, the last one that he just mentioned, he said in the failed war on drugs, totally agree. But where's the one about the war? Oh, he mentioned the war. That was a part of Justice Democrats. Guys, listen to this. Listen to this.
Raising the minimum wage, ensuring healthcare and education are rights for everyone, ending unnecessary wars, and
ending unnecessary wars. But they vote for it. They've been voting for the legislation to give money for those wars. Now, at the beginning of this segment, he said they signed a pledge. Just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind.
Ending the war on drugs, creating a renewable energy revolution, and most importantly, we know that they're actually going to push for these policies because they're signing a pledge.
What? So you guys heard that, right? For the people who ask me, what if we got the politicians to sign some type of a pledge? They signed one. They signed a pledge. And he said, you know, they're going to push for the policies because they signed a pledge. This is why I told you signing a piece of paper don't mean anything once you get in. Oh, we are breaking this apart tonight. Colin said, if Jink was a part of this, you know the JDs didn't sign no damn pledge. Oh, Colin. So you see, let's go on.
Justice Democrats will not be taking money from billionaires and large corporations, and almost all of these policies have majority support in public opinion polls. So I think that this.
But Justice Democrats, the organization, eventually decided to take billionaire money. Oh, dear.
This is a great way to ensure that we get people that are like Bernie Sanders, that agree with the policy positions that Bernie Sanders agrees with. And I love it. So how it works is you nominate someone, and if you want to change the country, you can run yourself. They'll vet you, and you very well could be a Justice Democrat. So
there's more to this video, but we're going to go ahead and talk about the pros and the cons really quick. So the pros and the cons for Justice Democrat. The pros were the fact that it was easier to get people that were running on progressive issues into Congress if they ran through the Democratic Party than if they ran third party or independent. Totally get that. Totally understand that. The cons. There was no way of holding them accountable once they got in there. Now, he said they signed this pledge, but after they won, they're not even upholding some of the things that were a part of that document that he just went through. So then how do you hold them accountable? They're already in, right? Well, you could not vote for them again. You can stop supporting that type of strategy, But then those same people who told you to do this are calling you nihilist because you're trying to hold them accountable. Do you see the problem? So that's one of the cons. The other cons, what I mentioned, was the corporate money. The corporate money going to the Democratic Party as a whole, going to the DNC as a whole, and the Democratic Party and the DNC using corporate money to prevent other progressives from getting into the House, and also starting PACs to try to prevent those from winning their reelections. And also decision making and swaying. They're there. They know if they want to keep their seat, they're going to have to go along with what the Speaker of the House wants. So again, those are the pros. Those are the cons. The one pro that I found was the fact that it is easier for them to get in running through the Democratic Party than running third party and independent. And I have a clip here. Now, this is from Bad Faith. This is when all three of us were on Bad Faith. Listen to this, because I highlighted this in this segment about the third party element that was missing. Listen to this, and then we're going to go on to the discussion about third parties with Ralph Nader and Jill Stein and Bernie. One thing I do want to point out in reference to that Justice Democrat strategy, and CJ actually reminded me of this on a stream that he did a while back. Part of that strategy was to also start a third party movement. In fact, the Humanist Report covered this. That piece was never implemented. So when we had these progressive candidates get into DC and they're supposed to fight for us, and they're not fighting for or fighting back against legislation where they had leverage, there was no backup plan. There was nothing else to fall back on. There was no third party movement that was started that was supposed to go along with this strategy. So now it was just like you had to run cover for these progressive politicians, try to make excuses for them, and try to convince viewers why you still need to support that strategy, even though people could see what was happening and what was going on. And this is where I think a lot of us at RBN, we point to a general strike, because this is an example that shows that the inside game is not working. So what do? You go back to the outside game. If you want to look at something like a general strike, we just saw the railroad workers. They were threatening to strike. Look how quickly Joe Biden jumped in to respond and act, because that affects the supply chain. So if you have the railroad workers, and if you have the truckers, and if you can have the port workers, which are also under duress right now on the West Coast, you get all three of those on board, that's your general strike. The quickest and fastest way to do it is through transportation, shutting down transportation services, because it affects the supply chain. So that's something that we feel should be heavily pushed, and that's an outside game. And we know that the response would be faster, because we just saw Joe Biden respond quickly to the railroad workers. But you need to have a list of demands. Okay. Let me zoom out. So yes, there was no backup plan. Like, if they won and they got in, what was the plan B? What was the backup plan in the event they decide not to push for those progressive policies? They decide to go ahead and cave and go along with the Democrat establishment in Congress. What was the backup plan? There wasn't one. Even when we did force the vote, when they did force the vote, not one of them could even appear to the town hall, and they didn't force the vote. Even after that, what was plan B? What was the backup plan? Hey guys, what happens if none of them decide to do this? I don't know. I didn't know about it. There was no plan. There was no other way to hold them accountable besides dismissing them. Now, I do want to go into the segment also about third parties, because I think it's important to talk about this as well. Now, this was a clip from Democracy Now! We're going to talk about the pros and the cons here, just like with Justice Democrats. Now, Democracy Now! Covered Jill Stein when she was protesting, because they would not let Jill Stein debate. Ralph Nader is also a part of this segment, and I want you to hear what they say about third parties. By the way, Jill Stein is based as fuck. I don't know too many people that would do what she did. So let's go in.
Well, it's official. When the first presidential debate takes place next Monday, a week from today, it'll exclude third-party candidates. The Commission on Presidential Debates announced Friday that both Dr. Jill Stein of the Green Party and Libertarian Gary Johnson, the former governor of New Mexico, failed to qualify by polling at 15% or higher. Johnson is currently polling at 8%, has reached as high as 12% at some points. Dr. Stein is reportedly averaging about 3% and has peaked at 6% in some national polls. A recent poll by Morning Consult found more than half of registered voters believe Johnson should partake in the debate scheduled for September 26, and nearly half believe Stein should as well. This comes as polls show Trump and Clinton are among the least popular major party candidates to ever run for the White House.
Okay, let's chime in here for a second. So one of the cons, obviously, with third-party candidates is getting to the debate stage. If you are running in a national campaign like Jill Stein was for president, you have to get at least 15%. Now, I do know of Ross Perot. Ross Perot was able to get, I believe, 18%. That's why he was on the debate stage with Bill Clinton and with George Sr. So I think that is important. We do have to acknowledge that. But how do we fix that? In order to increase their polling percentage, they have to be given a platform. We have to introduce them to as many people as possible. Now, we already know that mainstream media is going to smear them in every way, shape, or form, just like they did with Bernie Sanders, who was running as a progressive, even though he was going through the Democratic Party. They still smeared Bernie too. Let's just be real. This is where independent media is our job to come in and fill that void. If we sit back and ignore third-party candidates, then we are no better than mainstream media commentators for doing the same. We should not exclude them just because you don't think it's a viable option. They should also be included. This is the importance of independent media. We're supposed to come in and fill in those gaps. So if you're choosing not to give third-party and independent candidates a platform, then you are not a part of the solution. You are a part of the problem. And I want to be very clear about that. Let's go on.
McClatchy recently polled voters under the age of 30 and found 41% backed Clinton, 23% supported Johnson, 16% backed Stein, and only 9% backed Trump. In 2012, Stein and her running mate Sherry Honkala were arrested as they attempted to enter the presidential debate site at Hofstra University, the same location where next Monday's debate will take place. Democracy Now! Was there at the time of their arrest when the third-party candidates were blocked by a solid wall of police before sitting down on the ground. They were then arrested.
We're here to stand our ground. We're here to stand ground for the American people who have been systematically locked out of these debates for decades by the Commission on Presidential Debates. We think that this commission is entirely illegitimate, that if democracy truly prevailed, there would be no such commission, that the debates would still be run by the League of Women Voters, that the debates would be open.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are obstructing the vehicle of pedestrians and traffic. If you refuse to move, you are subject to arrest. Remove them, bring them back to your office.
Come on, man. Step up, please. Stand up. We'll help you. Come on.
They arrested them because Jill Stein showed up to debate. They arrested them. We don't have a real democracy. We don't have it. Why do you have to get this certain percentage to be on the debate stage? Why? And this calls for an arrest?
Thank you, ladies.
Watch the flag, please.
That's the Green Party's presidential candidate in 2012, Jill Stein, seeking entrance to the presidential debate at the time at Hofstra. This year, she's continued to demand four-way presidential debates and said in a statement she plans to show up with hundreds of supporters outside that first debate. The debates are organized by the Commission on Presidential Debates, which is controlled by the Democratic and Republican parties. It said it'll review the criteria for the second and third debates in the future. In a minute, we'll be joined by former third-party presidential candidate Ralph Nader.
So they said that is controlled by the Democrat and the Republican Party. And they said in the future, they will review the requirements. But this is on purpose.
And they were a very courageous and genuinely independent, nonpartisan sponsor. And whenever the candidates attempted to manipulate the presidential debates behind closed doors, either to exclude a viable independent candidate or to sanitize the formats, the League had the courage to challenge the Republican Democratic nominees and, if necessary, go public. In 1980, independent candidate John B. Anderson was polling about 12% of the polls. The League insisted that Anderson be allowed to participate because the vast majority of the American people people wanted to see him. But President Jimmy Carter, refused to debate him. The league went forward anyway and held a presidential debate with an empty chair, showing that Jimmy Carter wasn't going to show up. 4 years later, when the Republican Democratic nominees tried to get rid of difficult questions by vetoing 80 of the moderators that they had proposed to host the debates, the league said this is unacceptable. They held a press conference and attacked the campaigns for trying to get rid of difficult questions. And lastly, in 1988 was the first attempt by the Republican and Democratic campaigns to negotiate a detailed contract. It was tame by comparison, a mere 12 pages. It talked about who could be in the audience and how the format would be structured, but the league found that kind of lack of transparency and that kind of candidate control to be fundamentally outrageous and antithetical to our democratic process. They released the contract and stated they refused to be an accessory to the hoodwinking of the American people and refused to implement it. And today, what do we have? We have a private corporation that was created by the Republican Democratic parties called the Commission on Presidential Debates. It seized control of the presidential debates precisely because the league was independent, precisely because this woman's organization had the guts to stand up to the candidates that the major party candidates had nominated.
That's George Farah,
So that's important to know. You have the Republican Party and the Democratic Party preventing these candidates from getting that debate access that they should be able to have. I don't think you should have to poll at 15% to be able to debate, but these are the rules that we have. And I don't know how we could change that. But like I said before, that's where independent media comes in, especially for those of you that have larger audiences. You should be giving these candidates a platform. You should have someone like Jill Stein on your show. You should have someone like Matthew Ho on your show. You should have on John Stasevich, who's running for candidate as an independent for 2024. You should have him on your show, not just the people that you're trying to push, not just your friends. Not just because the people that you're friends with and that you want to run, but the third party candidates as well. Now, this is the piece here where Ralph Nader comes in, because like I told you, we're talking about the pros and the cons. And there are some things that Ralph Nader has to say as well. So listen to this, and he knows from his own experience.
Has a new book out, Breaking Through Power. It's easier than we think. He is speaking today here in New York. Ralph, talk about this decision that just came down. No third-party candidates in the first debate. You know this well.
Well, corporations are deciding who debates, when they debate, who asks the questions. So in the primaries, you had major corporations decide who gets on, who doesn't. They excluded, for example, the former head of the IRS, Mr. Iverson, former deputy of Immigration Service, the only man who had any experience in the federal government because he didn't have a super PAC sponsoring him.
So did you hear what Ralph Nader just said? He said it's corporations that decide who gets on that stage. Corporations. This is my other reason for the push for third party, because these people are picked. They're chosen. It's already decided. There is no fair system. It does not exist. I think we need to acknowledge that.
And you can see what they did with Dennis Kucinich in 2012. Now we have the Super Bowl of debates, and we have another corporation which is funded by other corporations like Anheuser-Busch, Ford Motor Company, AT&T. They have these hospitality suites at the debate location. And this is controlled by the two-party tyranny that doesn't want any competition, doesn't want voices that represent majoritarian directions in this country, like living wage, full Medicare for all, crackdown on corporate crime, pulling back on empire, civil liberties advance instead of the Patriot Act. All of these are represented by our third parties, which cannot reach tens of millions of people. You see, it's basically a terminal exclusion, because you can go and speak to the biggest crowds of all. I filled Madison Square Garden, the Boston Garden, the Target Center. I reached less than 2% of the people I could have reached had I been on one debate. And the polls again and again showed that a majority of the people want more people on that stage. They don't just want the Republican and Democratic Party going through basically parallel news conferences. They're not really debates.
You heard that? This is something I think that we should talk about as well. You had someone like Ralph Nader. He filled Madison Square Garden. Some comedians can't do that. Did mainstream media cover it? Did they cover it the way they would have covered Hillary Clinton running for president? Nah, not at all. That's why it is on independent media to do the work. That's why it's on independent media to do that coverage. Now there's more. So I mentioned one of the cons is that you have to have the 15% to get onto the debate stage. But again, that is if you're focusing on the national races. So the question comes in about Bernie Sanders. You have someone like Bernie Sanders who ran through the Democratic Party, but he's a registered, independent per se. And he was running on these progressive policies. But at the end, when he realized he wasn't going to win, he turns around and tells you to vote for his opponent, who is corporate, who is establishment, which were the same people that he was telling you to fight back against. Now he's telling you to go ahead and vote for them because you might end up with Trump. So you got Trump, you got Biden. They're both corporate. They're both corporate people. They're both corporate candidates. Does everybody see that the problem here? If the point of Bernie Sanders is going to be to tell you to go ahead and vote for the corporate Democrat that he loses to, and if he runs again, he will lose. The DNC is not going to let him win. I want to be very clear about that. If the purpose of him is to tell you to vote for the corporate candidate that he lost to, that Democrat, what is the point of Bernie Sanders trying to be a part of any type of progressive movement? Because ideally, what he's telling you to do is to settle. People that's trying to start a revolution don't settle. MLK didn't settle. Malcolm X didn't settle. Fred Hampton didn't settle. You see the problem? So when Bernie Sanders goes across the country and he tells people we're starting a revolution, we're starting a massive movement across this country, and then you fold and you tell people to settle for the status quo, the establishment, you're not serious about getting nothing done. You're not serious about getting any kind of change. You settled. So there's no point of you being a part of this. And I know some people are like, yay, let's let Bernie run again. Yay, yay. I would hate to see you guys be disappointed again. I was disappointed twice in a row. I would hate to see you get your hopes up just like you did before, only to be crying later on in the end. Because then you can say that Bernie screwed you 3 times. Now, Ralph Nader brings up this point. He brings up the point of what is the purpose of Bernie Sanders in this progressive movement. Let's hear what Ralph had to say about that.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Our guest for the hour is Ralph Nader, consumer advocate, 4-time presidential candidate. In July, former Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders formally endorsed Hillary Clinton. He's consistently argued against voting for a third-party candidate. In an interview with the Washington Post last week, Sanders said, quote, "This is not the time for a protest vote in terms of a presidential campaign. I ran as a third-party candidate," he said. "I'm the longest-serving independent in the history of the United States Congress." He said, "I know more about third-party politics than anyone else in Congress." In an interview with MSNBC's Chris Hayes, Senator Sanders explained his opposition to a protest vote.
All right. You disagree with Hillary Clinton on this or that. You may not like her on every respect, but look at the real issues that impact your lives, your children's lives, the future of this country. And
look at the real issues that impact your lives and your children's lives and the future of this country. And he's talking about in reference to people that supported him and may not have wanted to support Hillary Clinton. How was Hillary Clinton going to help improve the issues of working class people when she wouldn't even go to the coal miner towns to talk to people there, when she wouldn't even campaign in the Rust Belt, which NAFTA decimated people in the Rust Belt? How was she going to speak to the issues and help improve the issues of working class people when she wasn't even willing to go talk to them? You see, this is the part where Bernie tells you, go vote for Hillary, which he had already planned on doing, by the way. When I interviewed Jesse Ventura, he explained this. At the beginning of Bernie's campaign, he had already told him that he would not start third party independent. He would be supporting Hillary Clinton. And I wish I had known that, because if I had known that, I would have not given money to Bernie Sanders. Not one dime. Let's go back in.
You will end up concluding that right now is not the time to be supporting a protest vote. Right now, we have to make sure that Trump does not become president.
That is Senator Sanders. Ralph Nader, your response.
Well, it is a time for Senator Sanders to mobilize as he can. All his supporters around the country with mass rallies to put the heat on both candidates. Is there anything wrong with that? He should have a mass rally in the mall and then spread it all over the country. So you have civic pressure, citizen pressure coming in on all the candidates to further the just pathways of our society. Why doesn't he do that? Because, you know, Bernie Sanders hasn't returned a call from me in 18 years.
He didn't call Ralph back. Do you hear this? If this doesn't tell you who Bernie Sanders really is politically, and I'm not talking about him, I want to be clear here. I'm not talking about Bernie Sanders as a person. I'm talking about Bernie Sanders as a politician. And I think there's a difference. So pay attention to what Ralph Nader says here.
Supporters around the country with mass rallies to put the heat on both candidates. Is there anything wrong with that? He should have a mass rally in the mall and then spread it all over the country. So you have civic pressure, citizen pressure coming in on all the candidates to further the just pathways of our society. Why doesn't he do that? Because
why doesn't he do that? Why doesn't he do that? What is Bernie Sanders afraid of? Didn't he tell us in 2020 if he lost, he'll be outside with his movement and his people? No, we were outside. You were inside. You were inside with Joe.
Because, you know, Bernie Sanders hasn't returned a call from me in 18 years. He's a lone ranger. He doesn't like to be pushed into more progressive action than he is willing to adhere to. As a result, millions of his voters now are in disarray. They don't know where to go. They're cynical. Some will go Democrat. Some will support Libertarian, Green. Some will stay home. And so this huge, wonderful effort that he launched is now aborted. It's dissipating. So it isn't a matter of either or. It's a matter of him cutting out from the accolades to Hillary, which he doesn't like to do. He doesn't like to be a robot or run around the country that way, and mobilize the citizenry, which will transcend the election and start something effective after the election.
Well, 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 this piece right here, I think is very telling.
He's a lone ranger. He doesn't like to be pushed into more progressive action than he is willing to adhere to. As a result, millions of his voters now are in disarray. They don't know where to go. They're cynical. Some will go Democrat. Some will support Libertarian, Green.
Many people just pieced out, and I'm one of them. Like, you went across the country trying to start this movement, and then you say, just go ahead and vote for the corporate Democrat. Nah. That's another con, by the way, against the progressive Democrat strategy. Doing that justice. That's another con of running as a progressive through the Democratic Party. Because at the end of the day, they're going to tell you to vote for the corporate corrupt Democrat, which they're supposed to be fighting against. They say all those things are in their campaign. And then at the end, they tell you, yeah, go ahead and vote for the status quo corrupt son of a bitch. That's what they do. That's another con towards that strategy.
Some will stay home. And so this huge, wonderful effort that he launched is now aborted. It's dissipating. So it isn't a matter of either or. It's a matter of him cutting out from the accolades to Hillary, which he doesn't like to do. He doesn't like to be a robot or run around the country that way, and mobilize the citizenry, which will transcend the election and start something effective after the election.
That's right. And that wasn't done. Now, we talked about one of the cons for third parties is the fact that, yes, you do have to deal with the debate scenario. Again, on the national level, we're talking about mainly the national level. You have to deal with the debate scenario. That's an issue. You do have to deal with the fact that you're not on the ballot in every state. I get that. But then you look at someone like Jill Stein, who was on the ballot in over 40 states in this country. So it can be done. And the problem that you really need to recognize here is this. When people say that third parties aren't viable, why are they not considered viable on the national level? And that's because people are telling you to continue to vote for Democrats and Republicans. You have independent media outlets that are ignoring third party candidates and ignoring independent candidates. That's also part of the problem. So I will say this again. When you look at both strategies, Justice Democrat strategy, progressives going through the Democratic Party, you look at third party and you look at third party / independent, I would rather go for the third party independent route because we have already seen what the Democratic Party, how corrupt they can be towards the progressive politicians, the ones that get in. We've already seen that the Democratic Party is going to control those politicians. They're not going to go in and flip the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is going to flip them. 2, the corporate money aspect. The party is owned by big money. So even though those candidates are not taking big money, they're still going into a party that is owned by big money. The Speaker of the House sure as hell likes to take a lot of big money. And if you want to keep your career and if you want to keep your seat, you're going to have to go along with what Nancy Pelosi or whoever is going to be the Speaker of the House, what they want. That's how you get to stay. The people who go against that won't get that opportunity to stay. The other thing I would like to point to as well with the Justice Democrat strategy, what have they done for us? What have they done? We just saw this on Twitter early today. Rome is going to Jackson, Mississippi to give people water. What's the squad doing? What are they doing? Are they out there mobilizing the people? No, they're too busy doing Vogue covers. So how are they actually helping us? What are they doing for the people? Because I don't see much happening. So that's a big part of the problem as well. Now, there's one more piece I want to show. Told you we were going to do a deep dive into this tonight. I told you it was going to be a deep dive. There's one more piece I'd like to show, and that's in reference to third parties and local politics, which I think that's where third party and independent candidates have done the best. We're going to go to this video on bad faith, and we're going to go to the part, because there's one part that I talked about in the beginning where we go into local politics. And I do want to cover that part. So let me go ahead and show that. This piece is also important for people to know. Because if you still, are passionate about electoral politics, and that's the avenue that you want to focus on, okay, then I think you need to understand that locally is going to be your best option to get things done faster from what I've seen. And let me go ahead and play. I think it starts here. Is there captions? Okay, yeah. That's the part about going into DC. And then, okay, general strike. Okay, yeah. This part right here. Joe Biden respond quickly to the railroad workers, but you need to have a list of demands. So if you look at some of those policies that Bernie Sanders had, I think all of those should be included in the demands, not just higher pay, but give everybody health care, give everybody paid child care, give people paid sick leave, which one of the things that they were fighting for was just having paid sick leave. Those kind of things need to be added as a list of demands. And I think that can work faster. So all of us are frustrated about climate change. That's not going to work quickly through the Democratic Party. They'll pass like weak climate legislation. And at the same time, they're still doing fracking. They're still getting around that bill that was just passed. I just saw this with the state of Maryland. They're already working with oil refineries in West Virginia, but that's Joe Manchin's territory. So of course, he's going to go along with that. So I think for people who want to just do that inside strategy, I think they're going to have to focus on getting money out of politics. As long as the corporate money is there, it's going to be corrupt and they're going to serve corporate interests, not the interests of the people. The other avenue that they could do is they need to direct their focus more on local politics. Some of these policies that Bernie Sanders had on his platform, we've already implemented here in states like Massachusetts or in CJ's state like California. We already have paid family leave in Massachusetts for everybody. We passed the right for 15 years ago, and they've already passed the workers' rights in the sense that you don't have to disclose your salary when you're looking for a job. So a lot more can be done on the local level electorally than on the national level. So if you want to fight for those issues on the national level, I think the best way to do it is a general strike. And I think you need to focus more so on third party and independent candidates to really disrupt that duopoly. Okay, the local level. You heard about some of the things we already passed here in Massachusetts, and it's not just my state. On the local level, we're able to pass things a lot faster. This is what people need to understand. You don't have to necessarily just be a ballot initiative state. When it came to legalizing gay marriage, that was not something we actually voted on in Massachusetts. That pressure came from the activist group GLAAD, who sued the Superior Court in Massachusetts because the Superior Court in Massachusetts would not grant marriage licenses to, I think it was about 7 couples. So that activist group sued the Superior Court and put pressure on the Superior Court. And that is what made the push for them to legalize gay marriage in Massachusetts. That did not happen from DC. That did not happen from a politician here. That happened from the activist group. That's one example. We legalized marijuana. We have paid family leave for everybody in Massachusetts. That was started the beginning of this year or last year, I think. I think it was last year. We have that here. Some of these policies that Bernie Sanders and the Justice Democrats are fighting for, we've already passed on the local level, you guys. And you can do it too. This is what I want you guys to understand. Look, states are doing this all across the country. They're like, we're going to start this. South Dakota they're supposed to have this on the ballot in November to expand Medicaid in South Dakota. So if you're not a BI state, you can still do some things through state legislation or through activist groups putting that pressure on the state legislators. You have a better chance of speaking to your mayor. You have a better chance of speaking to your governor. I have zero chance speaking to the president of the United States. I have zero chance speaking to the members of the squad. I don't have those chances to talk to the people in DC, but I have opportunities to talk to politicians here on the local level. And if you want to look at the case for third parties on the local level, they've actually done pretty well. The problem is when people talk about them, they talk about them from a national perspective. They ignore the local races, and local politics is just as important, if not sometimes more important than national politics. People put so much focus onto the national level that they have legislators in their state making moves and taking names and passing laws, and they don't even know about it until it happens. Laws that could affect you. So you have to wake up and pay attention to local politics. This is where you are going to get the most gain, and this is where it's going to be done the fastest, is through the states. Now, the exception to that is obviously going to be something like Medicare for All. Obviously, that is taking a lot of work. There is an initiative put forward for that as well in Massachusetts. But some of these other things we could be doing locally. So for me, it's just like, I want everybody to have these things. I want everybody to have paid family leave. I want everyone to be able to have, marijuana legalization. That should be legal all over the country. Why is this even still an issue? What I'm trying to tell you is that the greatest power I think you're going to have electorally through the hands of the people is going to be on the local level. That's where you have the most say, and that's where you'll get the most gains.